Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us here today for this very critical discussion on the intersecting fight for healthcare and housing in Rochester, New York. This event comes at a time while we are all in the midst of an ongoing housing and healthcare crisis locally in Rochester, New York, as well as at the state and national level. My name is Sabine Adler, and I'm here with the New York State Poor People's Campaign and the Rochester Homeless Union. And I will be helping to facilitate our incredible group of panelists that we have this evening. So this event is taking place as a virtual Medicaid march, which is coinciding with this national week of action with the Medicaid marches. So there have been over 24 events across 9 different states holding Medicaid marches. So this event, the intersecting fight for healthcare and housing in Rochester, New York, the webinar and panel discussion is also alongside with the event happening this Saturday, October 10th, that Metro Justice and New York Health are putting on at Genesee Valley Park at 2 p.m. So please attend if you can. So the Medicaid marches are coming along with this newly established masked organization called the Nonviolent Medicaid Army. And their mission says, those who are on or excluded from Medicaid represent the diversity of our entire class and are impacted by every single front of struggle there is. Be it the fight for housing, living wages, food, education, freedom from debt, freedom of migration, or freedom from criminalization and incarceration. The fight for Medicaid unites the North and South of the US, and the fight for healthcare broadly unites the global working class. In essence, as we will see moving forward in this period, the totality of the working class is connected to the struggle for Medicaid for all. It becomes a lens through which the masses of poor and dispossessed people can see themselves and become united around a political center of gravity, which keeps us moving in a direction in line with the spirit and potential of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival. So tonight we have our panelists, which are community organizers and leaders with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for more revival, the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, Rochester Homeless Union, National Union of the Homeless, the Campaign for New York Health, and the Rochester City Wide Tenants Union, as long as House of Mercy. They will be sharing their insights, experience, and expertise from their grassroots organizing around the interlocking issues of healthcare and housing at the local, state, and national level. And then we will have about 20 to 30 minutes at the end of the event to take questions, comments, or personal stories related to the issues covered by the panelists. And I will try my best to monitor the chat box while the panelists present to take any immediate questions or comments. So we will first hear from Kristen Colangelo. She's with the National Union of the Homeless, New Jersey Poor People's Campaign, Put People First Pennsylvania, and the Cairo Center. She's an amazing woman, so I will go to her now.
You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you so much, Sabine. And I just want to say it's awesome to be here with you and be here with my friends from Rochester. I have to say, in many different walks and groups and just collectives that we've been a part of, we've been working with folks in Rochester for over 20 years. And we have been trying to work together to address the conditions that result in things like homelessness, lack of health care, housing loss, tenant associations, all the things that all the people that are fighting to change the conditions for the suffering that we see every day against our class. And the thing that this pandemic is really showing is that even those that think they're safe, those that have good wage jobs, right? Good wage jobs, and have great health care, what we used to call back in the day before the Affordable Care Act, Cadillac, right? Or blue chip health care. If you lose that job and if you lose that health care, you are one paycheck away from homelessness and dying on the streets. And this pandemic is showing this every single day. And the sisters and brothers and siblings and family in Rochester, we have been together a long time trying to think and figure this stuff out. And to be part of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, the National Union of the Homeless is part of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, which is a national collective of grassroots base building organizations fighting on all fronts of struggle: homelessness, hunger, healthcare, wages, ecological devastation, coming together through this vehicle of healthcare, which is across all struggle. If you are without a house, you are without healthcare. If you are without adequate food, you are without healthcare, right? If you are without a job that provides proper healthcare, you can be one of those people that's right on the edge that doesn't get Medicaid and doesn't get employer healthcare. So this is one of those vehicles that brings us together and unites us as a class of poor and dispossessed, right? Those that are dependent on a wage to really eat, live, and house ourselves. So the National Union of the Homeless began in the late 80s and 90s when some of this deindustrialization and loss of millions of jobs very quickly was occurring and hitting the working class, hitting a lot of people that were in trades and in industrial jobs. These jobs were lost overnight, and people were finding themselves homeless very quickly once they lost those jobs. And the Homeless Union was filled with the people the actual people that built this country, right? The people that built the bridges and built the buildings and the roads, and were now without a job. They had been, downsized and displaced and depossessed. So they came together and they fought to change the narrative around homelessness, and to show that there was a face that was different than the corporate media was showing. That these were families, these were children, these were those that were working, single people to families with 6 or 7 children, just immediately losing their housing, and to bring that to light, to say, housing and healthcare now, no more death on the street, and that we are homeless, but we are not helpless, and that we are all that. What this shows then and is showing now is that many of us, 140 million, a good chunk of the 140 million we talk about, 1 to 2 paychecks away from homelessness. And the Nonviolent Medicaid Army is so crucial right now because it's bringing us together across these lines of division, across these fake invisible fences, as a colleague called it in Baltimore last night, built around us to divide us, because our power is in each other. And in our organization to build power and to build base, to bring about these changes. I just want to raise up, we have one of the founders and one of the leaders of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, Nijmi from Put People First, is on this call today, has been for the past 2 months, been tirelessly working with all the other leaders to pull this off. And the week of action that happened beginning last week and into this week has been amazing. I have been very emotional this entire time, seeing slideshows from all the marches and all these virtual events, because it's across our country right now where people are rising up to say, we have a right to life. We have a right to food. We throw away 40% of the food that we produce in this country while people starve. We have a right to a safe, adequate house. Well, we have more homes than people need. So why is House of Mercy? They're never lonely. They're busting at the seams. They could do with 5 more buildings and still not address the issue. And this is across the country. And why is it that our beautiful hearts and our intentions of places like House of Mercy across the country, where we have leaders working tirelessly to address these issues, why is it that every day more and more people are becoming dying without healthcare, dying without housing, and dying without food and a living wage, right? Or dying from ecological devastation. And what we're trying to raise up through this vehicle of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army is that there's a real issue with the way the system is created, where profit over people exists, and that our healthcare system, our housing system, our food system are based on profit, and that we suffer because of that. While during a pandemic where we've lost over 208,000 people have died from this virus, while our billionaires have made hundreds of billions of dollars in profit. That's a system that we can no longer sit with. That's a system that we have to come together and fight across all struggle, across all differences. The greatest success in keeping us divided is these invisible fences, right? And coming together across these struggles and seeing that they're connected in one root cause of a system that has the productive capacity to throw a house up in 45 minutes, that produces more food than we can eat. And many studies show that we produce enough food to feed the world, right? We have amazing healthcare technology, but the way the system is set up right now, we couldn't get masks to our healthcare and our frontline workers, right? We can't get healthcare. We're losing this battle. And that's a system issue. Though it is often in the narrative is that it's a behavioral issue. And I really want to stress that we have to come together to study this system and this problem. Because without a correct analysis of a problem, you can't create a solution to that problem. And we often say that without this correct and collective analysis, that means we all come to it together. And the strategies such as a nonviolent Medicaid army and a national union of the homeless and a put people first and a Rochester Homeless Union coming, being clear on this. Any solution we put into place based on an incorrect analysis will fail over and over and over. And our social welfare system creates and dictates what the problem is and what the solution is. And everything that is put into place through this system, this nonprofit industrial complex, does not cure housing, homelessness, does not stop people dying on the streets, does not stop hunger, because it doesn't have a correct analysis. So we come together to march, we come together to talk, we come together to think, and we come together to fight for our rights to a life with the access to live, the access to be housed, the access to eat, and the access to live together in a society that puts us first. Put people first, right? That's what we're talking about. Put people first. And that means that when you're talking about putting people first, you're talking about their well-being. We have this thing in social work where you have these 8 dimensions of wellness. I don't know if you all have seen these, but it's really, helpful. But if you look at this is what we're talking about. When you put people first, they're able to breathe, they're able to have water, they're able to have health care, they're able to live a life. The one thing that I do want to mention before I close is that the National Union of the Homeless, along with Rochester's union, we're going into our winter offensive, which is connected to the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, and that the Nonviolent Medicaid Army is part of the winter offensive, and the National Union of the Homeless is part of the Nonviolent Medicaid Army. And we're going to do, we are building on the history of the original homeless union, where we have these actions and these mobilizations and these teach-ins and these classes throughout Thanksgiving through Martin Luther King birthday. And one of the things that we talk about is this twisted narrative. We talk about this in the Poor People's Campaign, right? This twisted narrative, and much of it based on the Bible. And we talk a lot about, if you want to use the slogan, put Christ back into Christmas, Christ was a revolutionary. If you're going to put Christ back into Christmas, then you better house somebody and you better heal somebody, right? And you better feed somebody. Jesus, as he was doing this, he taught and built and had a collective of people that then went out and replicated and did that, as well. So we're using these Winter Offensive and the Nonviolent Medicaid Army to replicate ourselves, to find other leaders. There are brilliant leaders out there in the midst of poverty that we find through these events. So going through the Nonviolent Medicaid Army as we are right now in this week of action, 2 weeks of action, and then going into the Winter Offensive is our way of getting in touch with our class, getting in touch with our people through all these different issues and all these different vehicles and bringing them together to become one fighting mass. And I will say that 2 people mentioned this week, Nijmi putting it up on her Facebook, and one person in a class in Baltimore last night about this vision. I want you to think about this vision of our class being the sleeping giant. The mass of people in our class is a sleeping giant. And on that sleeping giant is this little tiny flea. And if we can wake up just enough and organize just enough, this giant sleeping giant to flick that flea off and to rise up together, that's the new and unsettling force. And that's what we're here today to build. And I want to thank you. And I just want to say to Sister Grace and to Sabine and to Patrick and other members of the Homeless Union in Rochester, you're not just leading people in Rochester, you're leading people across the nation. And that's what we're talking about. And I want to say thank you and God bless you. And I'm excited for our other speakers, and I'm really excited about this event. And I will probably, I'm sorry, have to jump off early because I'm still at my office. But if there's ever any questions or you want to continue the conversation, House of Mercy, the Homeless Union, Sabine have my contact information. I'll also put it in the chat. So thank you very much. I think Sabine came in under my time, which is a miracle.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for providing such a crucial analysis and really rooting us on where the true problem lies, and also just for your inspiring words for the Winter Offensive and this next year for the people rising up, because it truly will be a new and unsettling force. So with that, we are going to move to our next panelist. So we're going to go to Patrick with the Rochester Homeless Union and Poor People's Campaign, and following Sister Grace with the House of Mercy. So.
Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming. I've been taught in order to make change, that we should come with teams as one unit, and the people that are on this panel at this particular time, I feel is we're one unit. The Rochester Homeless Union, we can't do anything alone, nor can the House of Mercy, nor can the Citywide Tenants Union. The National Union of Homeless has put in an immense amount of work in trying to prevent homelessness, to assist and direct the homeless people in our society. Being on the ground and working in the street now to homeless prevention, I've noticed in the city of Rochester, the sheltering count is going up, maybe lowering in certain shelters because they're ejecting individuals. That is allowing the street count of the homeless to rise. And these people are not able to be, don't have the means or the knowledge, and don't have the people that are advocating for them properly. It's a big world, and it's a big city for Rochester, and they're not just being taken care of properly. Thank God we have the House of Mercy, because at this time, as always, Sister Grace never turns anybody away. If it wasn't for Mercy and Sister Grace's participation in giving us the education that we need throughout the Homeless Union and the support that we have, we would be like in the water by ourselves. Healthcare is a very important part of being. Housing first, I believe, is more important, because you can't be healthy at all if you don't have a home. Housing first, healthcare, housing and healthcare are intertwined to one another, and it's a very significant factor in everybody's lives in the impoverished society. I can give you an example. I needed some assistance with my healthcare here just recently, and they actually allowed me to participate in this facility, and they was watching after me and, speaking the things that I needed to hear. helping me as much as they possibly can. And Medicaid denied me, and I got a bill for like $2,700. And I'm poor. I have a low income. I'm not able to afford the health care. I think health care should be free for everybody. I think health care is the most important factor in a person's life, especially impoverished individuals. The homeless people are not, they don't have the help or the assistance or the means or the transportation to be given a good sustainable life being on the street. Um, Housing issues in the city of Rochester, we have the moratorium, which for months and months, I've seen people come. I think it's a bunch of crap. I think it's not. They're not telling us the truth. They're hiding something for. And I know it's a part of the system. It's a tool being used by the system to keep the impoverished poor, to keep poor, to keep people on the street, to put people on the street. And along this epidemic has come about. People are losing their jobs. They're not being able to go back to their work because of the downsizing in the places that they work. People are not able to go back and get the financial structure in their life that's required for them to be living accordingly. In order for us to come together as a team of people, we must obtain some type of education. We have a lot of people that know different things. We don't all know everything. Some people know some things, and we know some things. But if we come together as an organization, as a team, as one unit, I think we continue to put things together in order to make change. I hear this, Sister Grace often says that she wants to make sure that her legacy is protected. Um, I had to actually try to figure that out. I had no idea what she was talking about. But I realized the legacy is every life that you've touched, every person that you've assisted, every person that you've helped throughout your life, doing God's will, doing what your heart feels. And we need to stick together as a team. We're all brothers and sisters here. And that's the legacy that I wish for the Rochester Homeless Union as being a part of mercy to leave us all. So we're protecting the legacy. We're protecting our people. Our people are very important to us. Um, like I was saying, the job loss epidemic in the moratorium. They claim that we have a moratorium in which people are not being evicted out of their homes. I've seen plenty of eviction notice. I've seen a couple today, and we're not having an extension by Como for the moratorium. Supposedly it's supposed to start in January, but I'm hearing that it's not going to happen till they come in some type of decision. Well, the courts are open and they're evicting people now as we speak. Um, Me and a guy from Wide Tenants Union speaking of that, and it's wrong. It's wrong for people to be able to not be able to be watched after during a time where they don't have an income that's proper in order for them to maintain a life or to support their families. Um, there's no way out. We have to come together as a society and help one another throughout these hard times of COVID. And people are out there under the bridge, at the garage, at the Radisson, and they're all compiled on the street, close, not having the safe distancing, but yet they're not able to go get tested. These people are passing possibly COVID to the next, and they say that the sheltering system and the homeless is the ground zero for this virus. Healthcare is a requirement. Healthcare is needed, and we got to come together. And these are people that I chose to come together as a team. And the stories that they told and the outreach that they're doing, I really appreciate it. And I like having the union involved. It's very important to me as a person, as to our leaders in the homeless union. Our leadership team is still the same people, but we're trying to revise and educate more so in a manner so we'll know what we're fighting for. In order to fight for something, you got to know what you're fighting for and have the means and the way to understand what you're fighting for, how to put out this fire. We got to learn how to put out this fire together. We can talk, and we can talk. But in order, talking is just not just playing a song. I'm tired of listening to the song. I think we should organize as a team of people and find a way to get into these offices and the assembly members and the congressional leaders and get these bills passed to get it out there. We can no longer be in the street with signs because it's not safe. So we're devising other methods, like to be on webinars as a team of people. We could reach the world right through a computer. That's what I had to say. Yeah, she's coming in this year. That's it to be.
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick. So true. And this is, a really amazing opportunity for all these different organizations and organizers to come together, because we're all fighting for the same thing. And I think, that will really scare them when we all start coming together and using all of our knowledge and skills and expertise to really organize something really powerful. So now we're going to hear from Sister Grace with the House of Mercy.
All right, thank you for the invitation to speak to you tonight. I want the city, I want the country, I want the world to know that homelessness is a very serious problem all over the world. But here in Rochester, there are homeless on our streets, there are homeless all over. And I opened the House of Mercy in 1985 because I would be driving through the city at night going to meetings, and I would find homeless men on the streets. And it was like nobody cared for them. So I would pick them up and take them into homeless shelters. And believe it or not, in cold, wintry weather, below zero, homeless shelters would refuse to take in homeless people. And this happened with the churches when they had shelters. And it really bothered me. And I remember taking them to one shelter after another, and being refused on a cold, wintry night, refusing to take in homeless people. And that really is sinful. It's a crime, and it's against anything that the Lord would want. So it was when I saw this repeatedly that I thought there needs to be a place in Rochester, and really all over the world, that's open 24 hours so that homeless people can come in and be taken care of like human beings and be loved and cared for spiritually as well as physically, because this is a mandate from the Lord. We have to take care of one another. So spiritually, we have to take care of our people as well as physically. And so I opened the House of Mercy, and October 1st, 1985, and that first month, over 600 people came to the House of Mercy for help. And then the numbers kept increasing, 700, 1,000, 2,000. So here we are in 2020, and homeless people are still flocking to the House of Mercy. So it tells you about the seriousness of this issue. We've been in existence for 35 years, and still there are so many homeless on our streets. And, we moved from one building to a larger building to a larger building, and no building was large enough. So we need the city, we need the county government, we need all the governments, all those in power to come together to take care of our homeless. They're in the bottom rung of the ladder, and they need to be elevated. And we all have a responsibility to take care of our homeless. Everyone has that responsibility. There are too many people who are comfortable. There are people in government making millions of dollars and don't care about the poor who are on our streets, especially on cold nights. So we have a very serious problem. And the numbers of homeless keep increasing, not decreasing. And I want to say that, we have 82 beds here, but we put out counts, we have over 100 that come, this is outside of the COVID period. But we get criticized for taking homeless in when no one else will take them. And that's a serious problem too. And it's people in power, those in government, that are criticizing us for taking in homeless when they have no place else to go. So you can see the severity of the problem. Now, with COVID, it makes the matter even worse because of the social distancing. We're looking at places where we can place our homeless, where they'll be safe. And, where do they go? I'm worried about winter coming. We had people in a hotel for a while. That hotel is closed now. So if we don't have places for our people, our homeless this winter, where are they going to go? We're trying to look at another hotel to see if we can get our people in. But this problem of homelessness, it shouldn't be just our problem. It should be the problem of people in government, people with power who can help us take care of the homeless. It's a very severe problem. And I'm concerned about what's going to happen when the weather gets even colder and there's snow on the ground. Where are our homeless going to go, especially if numbers are limited in certain shelters? Now we know that the welfare system has what they call the sanctions, and I think you all know what sanctions are. If someone applies for welfare and they don't come through with all the demands, all the things they have to turn in, documents they have to turn in, then they're sanctioned, they're cut off, which means they get no money, nothing for 45 days, 145 days, it's sometimes even 2 to 3 years. And so they're left with nothing. So welfare has to get rid of its sanctions because sanctions keep people homeless. and it keeps increasing the number of homeless that are on the streets. And there are some shelters that will not take in people that are sanctioned because welfare pays for them to stay in their shelters. And if they're not, if they're sanctioned, they don't get any money, then they're not allowed in some shelters. We're open 24/7. We allow anyone in here, and we feed them 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we have snacks in between. And we take anybody in. People are welcome to come in. Street people are welcome to come in and eat our meals. So we open up our house to the poorest people that we have here in Rochester. We see it as very essential. We see it as a spiritual mission. This is what the Lord wants us to do. This is what Jesus did when Jesus was walking the streets, taking care of all those who were in front of him, curing them, healing them. And I think it's the least we can do in our society. Now, housing is at a premium here in Rochester. We try to get homeless people into houses. Where are they? And some people go into rooming houses and apartments, and they come back and say, I can't live there. The situation is too bad. You know, so we need housing. And then you see what's happening downtown with the gentrification. And, you know, and poor people are put out of the city for wealthy people to come in to pay the rents there, which are extremely high. And there's no way a poor person can live in downtown where the rents are, what, $800, $1,000, $2,000 a month. They can't pay that. You know, and so what happens to them? They're left stranded, and many of them are still back on the streets. And I feel the county and the government can do much more to help our homeless, and that's their responsibility. But it seems like the homeless are the last thought. They've got much more important business to tend to, and the homeless are not part of it. And it should be one of their first priorities, taking care of the homeless. Now, we have many homeless that are mentally ill, and we can't get the help that we need for the mentally ill. And so we send them to hospitals and for help. They send them right back to us. And I'm saying that pretty soon the House of Mercy will have all mentally ill people, because those institutions that are responsible for the mentally ill are not taking them in. And if they do, they put them right out immediately. They're back out in the streets, and we have them right here at the House of Mercy. And I'm sure other shelters do too. And I think that the other part of homelessness that's important is they need community. They need a family. And when they're at our shelter, they belong. They belong to a family. They belong to a community. And they have a sense of worth and a sense of well-being, which I think is very important. And, you know, we do try to get them on their feet, and we do get many of them on their feet, which is important. But if they can't get on their feet, they'll stay with us until we can really take care of them and make sure they're okay, that they're settled in society. The other thing I want to say is that people should not make judgments about homeless people. And I see that so often. They say, well, they're just drug addicts or alcoholics. But we have to understand that there are reasons why a person might be homeless, and it might be on drugs and alcohol. And we find by listening to their stories, which is very important to give them time to listen to what they have to say about their lives. They've come from traumatic childhoods. They've had terrible experiences as children. They've kept them to themselves. They haven't spoken to anyone about them. And so as they grow, as they get older, they keep them inside and they can't take it. And so they're going to fall, they're going to try to get some kind of relief, and they're going to get it through drugs or alcohol. So we can't blame them for what they've fallen into. Where has society been in helping them when they were young and they were carrying these heavy burdens and didn't know where to go and had no one to speak to? So, you know, there are many reasons why people are homeless. And I think the last thing I want to say is that it's a system in our society that keeps people homeless, where they could reach out and really change those systems to give people freedom, to give them a life, to give them a home, to let them know they're cared for, that we love them, that God is in their midst. That's what we need to do. And we cannot stand by and have just people put homeless people down and say, well, they're just drug dealers and alcoholics and they don't want to help themselves. That is not true at all. And I think that anybody who works with the homeless knows that these are human beings, and all they want is to be loved, cared for, and they want a chance to live. And the other thing is, we know that our educational system, especially in Rochester, has really failed our youth. And if they can't read by the time they're in 3rd grade, they're lost. And so you have many of our youth dropping out of school, not being educated, hanging out in the streets, what is there for them? They can't get jobs, and you can't blame them for it, but it's so easy to put the blame on the homeless rather on the systems in our society that has failed them. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of educating the public and making people aware that we have homeless that need to be cared for. They don't need to be condemned. They don't need to be judged. And we have to treat them with loving care. The House of Mercy is a spiritual mission. We look at our homeless as people sent to us by God. It's Jesus standing before us. And so what would Jesus do in this instance? Jesus would wrap his arms around the person and help that person to live, and not subjugate the person to a harder way of life.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you very much, Sister Grace. I don't have to say much around you.
Yes, thank you so much too. Just start off, thank you so much for your service and all that you've done for the community in Rochester, but then also not only providing, a space for people to get their basic needs, but to also go even further and see what is causing to put people there. I think a lot of people kind of don't even start what you're doing, even helping people, but then don't go even further to really prevent this happening from anyone else. So it's truly needed. So thank you so much, Sister Grace. And we're going to move on to Barbara with the Wide Tenants Union.
Oh.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on the call. I'm going to pretty much elaborate what Patrick and Sister Grace had said. It was very powerful. 2020 has been like a wild ride for all of us, but it's been even more wild for our tenants and homeless people. This moratorium, with it being expired on the 1st of October, kind of put a lot of stress on a lot of people because of the misinformation, and people were thinking, oh my gosh, like it got extended to January, and that wasn't the case. Like the what was expanded to January was the Tenant Safe Harbor Act, and that's until January, like Patrick said, and that's frustrating because the Citywide Tenant Union, we've been to court to see what the process is over there for housing. As a lot of you know, we got the right to counsel passed, so that means that tenants will be represented by Law New York, Legal Aid, or whomever in court, just to level out the playing field for both sides. Like the landlords will be represented, but also tenants will be represented. As of last week, a ton of evictions have been put out already. Judge Johnson has signed a bunch of evictions. Just as today, also in our group chat, I was told that she signed another eviction. Meanwhile, her colleagues are doing hearings for January when the Harbor Act is up. So it's kind of frustrating because people are already being evicted. And what sucks the most about this act is that the tenants need to provide some type of evidence that they had lost their income due to COVID. And so it doesn't really cover everybody. I think that it's about 1.5 million New Yorkers altogether that are at risk of being evicted because of this. So, citywide, we've been trying to advocate for extending the moratorium for about till the end of COVID is done, plus a year, so it's about 2 years or so. We're also advocating for permanent housing solutions, like a housing access voucher program for our unhoused neighbors. I call them our unhoused neighbors. Some people call them the homeless. I think they deserve, sorry, my daughter's here. I think they deserve permanent housing, and I'm tired of seeing my community members on the street or in a homeless shelter, or as of right now, they're being put in a hotel. Like, when are they gonna make that transition to a house, to an apartment, to a studio? Like, there should be something in place to help them get off their feet and into something permanent. And it's also safe for them. It keeps them safe from COVID. It keeps them safe from the street violence. It keeps them, safe and healthy from, keeps them sober from drugs and alcohol. Like, I've heard and seen a great change in a lot of our unhoused neighbors who are in the hotels, which is amazing, because that right there shows that housing can make a great healthy change for anybody. I, a lot of, I'm frustrated because our Black and Brown communities are already affected by this housing crisis already. And in 2020, we're affected even harder. I live in the 19th ward. I walk in and out of these neighborhoods all of the time. Like, I see this firsthand. Like, people are so tired of losing their housing. It's about time that we start winning our housing. We start enjoying our housing, start living in housing, instead of being worried about whose couch am I going to stay on? Whose place can I stay until I can afford $900 a month in rent at the Nathaniel downtown, which wasn't really built for me or anyone in this community, but was built actually for tourists, people who are better well off, people coming from Fairport or just Henrietta, people who have good paying incomes coming to our downtown area to live off of housing that we could never afford. Even if we're on DSS, we still can't afford that. We're still struggling. We're still struggling to feed our families and do all that. So, this entire housing situation it's hard for all of us, and it's not gonna get any better if we don't start thinking about the tenants and the homeless who actually generate money into landlords' pockets. Because once again, I say this a lot, without us, there is no income coming for you to own that property. And you're gonna have to look elsewhere to bring that income in. So why not work with the families that are living in your properties to make sure that this pandemic is under control, to make sure that this housing issue is under control? I had a friend who's a landlord that called me, and he's pissed off because we're worried about the people who are most affected, and we're not thinking about landlords. And I'm like, well, in order for us to think about the landlords, we need to think about the people who are occupying those properties first, their first priority. Our homeless shelters are at capacity. We can't keep putting people in shelters. It's crazy, especially because we have so many empty units in our neighborhoods and landlords who refuse to give those units to people in need because whatever selfish reason that I've heard these past few months. Like, I talk to my neighbors. I talk to tenants all the time. Like, just today, I came from a tenant's house, and the infestation in her home is so bad. Roaches were falling off the ceiling, mice droppings all over the place. She opens her fridge, there's roaches in her fridge. The infestation is so bad. She's got 3 children. She sent 2 of her children to Florida to live with their father, and she kept her 14-year-old so that she could finish continuing school. And she said that her kids tested positive for lead, and it's so high that I don't understand how no one cares that this child can be affected for life because of lead poisoning. I'm just so furious that her landlord is worried about rent, but the infestation in her home is so out of control that when I walked out And I stomped my feet because she was like, make sure you shake yourself off because you might bring something home. I shook my boots, everything. Roaches falling off my shoes. It's out of control. That's just out of control. But you want to serve her an eviction notice for not paying rent. But you have this woman living in the most inhumane conditions I've ever seen in my life. Like, I have pictures of roaches coming out of their food. Like, it's out of control. But they want rent money. But you have people living in this sickly situation, and you have the nerve to tell me you're gonna evict her. But where is she gonna go? She doesn't have anybody to go to. She doesn't have the money to go to a hotel or to pay for an expensive apartment, relocate, none of that. She doesn't have that. So it's like either you fix the problem or more problems are gonna happen. Because during this whole pandemic, people's houses have been left to be in such a disarray, it's just getting out of control. And we have to start thinking about our community, our friends, our family, and we have to stop forgetting about the homeless people. Because like Sister Grace and Patrick said, they're always the last ones to be thought about. And that's unfair, not only to them, but just in general. Like, they're human beings. They deserve to be living in housing. They're not animals. They don't deserve to live in a shelter. They don't deserve to like fight for bedding or like any ridiculous things like that. That's no. And I'm really grateful for places like House of Mercy that house their our unhoused neighbors no matter what. Because without organizations like them, our homeless will still be sleeping on the street. They'll still be trying to find warmth at the RTS bus station. They'll still be trying to figure it out. Or they'll still be living over at Peace Village in a tent in the cold. Wintertime's coming. And there's no place for us to put people in the winter. And right now it's the worst time for tenants because this is when landlords really start to evict people. Even before our pandemic, this was the problem. And it's just, we're really, as a community, we have to push through with each other, and we have to start thinking about how we can help each other rise up out of this situation and pretty much get comfortable with making uncomfortable conversations happen with everybody. Thank you for letting me speak.
I had a question.
Yeah, well, actually, we have one more speaker and then we'll have an open forum for questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, it was about the property owner, that person
Okay.
that Barbara was just talking about. I'll save the question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll have time at the end for some questions. Thank you so much, Barbara. That was incredibly moving, and also heartbreaking too, to hear about the real situations that are happening every day in Rochester. So thank you for bringing those stories to light. We have one more speaker, so I'm gonna go to Mahima with the Campaign for New York Health.
Hi all, thanks for having me. I think it'll be incredibly difficult to follow all of those amazing speakers that were sharing very personal and like real stories about what is actually going on in Rochester. So I'm with the Rochester chapter of the Campaign for New York Health. And before I kind of dive into the New York Health Act, I wanted to affirm what the other speakers said, that like housing truly is healthcare. And from the perspective of like the health justice movement, you know, there are like obviously, like as people have mentioned, a lot of direct connections between housing and healthcare. So there are like the impacts of not having stable housing and how that impacts your health. There are the like direct impacts of living in housing that has terrible like effects on your health. So like Barbara was talking about lead poisoning and, you know, like infestations and like mildew, and like these are like the real impacts that, you know, folks all over our city have. And then like, you know, like I feel like the third like kind of grouping of like how housing is healthcare is really like how, you know, the fact that like for most people paying for housing is the majority of their income. And in that situation, there are like enormous health impacts from the financial burden of having to pay for truly like unaffordable housing. So there is like a like wealth of like research out there that illustrates all of these like examples. But I think that like what is more moving than like all of the statistics that show that like not having stable housing and not having safe housing and not having affordable housing is like a death sentence. I think like all of the stories that you all have shared before me are much more meaningful than just like the numbers that prove that. But yeah, I think that for all of those reasons, housing is healthcare, and not having housing is a death sentence for many folks. So kind of moving towards the health care side of things. So like, what are those solutions for creating a healthcare system that can kind of support the other things that we're talking about? So the healthcare system that we have right now is not a healthcare system. It's a combination of so many different things. We have folks that are on private insurance through their employers. We have folks that are, on who are elderly and on Medicare. We have folks that are on Medicaid. We have the Children's Health Insurance Program. We have the VA. We have the Indian Health Services. There are like a million different programs that are providing health insurance for Americans right now. And it's not a system. It's insurance companies that are creating a for-profit market here. So this isn't a system. It's profit-driven. It's wasteful. It's fragmented. It's multi-tiered. So there's so many ways to fall through this system. There's so many gaps, and not everyone has equal access. It's separate and unequal, which makes it unjust, and it's incredibly expensive. So even pre-COVID, we know that the percentage of folks that have high deductible health plans is going up. More and more uninsured Americans are having difficulty affording healthcare. People are putting off healthcare, postponing care because it's so expensive. The latest poll that I saw from just a few weeks ago, a quarter of Americans skipped medical care in the past year because they couldn't afford it. 45% are worried that a major illness will bankrupt them. The number one cause of personal bankruptcy in the US is medical bills. And then in the light of this pandemic that we're living in right now, 27 million people in just the first few months of this pandemic have lost their employer-sponsored health insurance. And that doesn't even account for, the millions and millions of people that didn't have insurance to begin with, and that are now struggling with all sorts of other expenses that this pandemic has put on them and their families. And it doesn't even have to be like a major insurance to be a stressor. So I work with like a local mutual aid group, and we have been seeing so many requests for from folks who need help paying for prescriptions and need help paying for housing and need help paying for bills. And if your first concern is having a roof over your head, you might not have the money to pay for medical bills and might not have the money to afford your insulin. And, that's a lose-lose situation. And it doesn't have to be this way. We have been kind of, I think, manipulated by this for-profit like industry that is around us, and we don't have to have this system. So in terms of kind of what the Campaign for New York Health envisions as that solution, so I want to frame our solution in a human rights framework, because housing is a human right and healthcare is a human right. It's written explicitly into the New York State Constitution that healthcare is a human right for the inhabitants of New York State. And as a campaign, we are committed to creating a healthcare system, or a health system, not just a healthcare system, a health system that's based on those principles. So the principles that we're organizing around, so universal care, number one. So every person that lives in New York State is covered under the same program. There are no barriers due to age, income, wealth, employment, health status, immigration status. The second like organizing principle under our framework is comprehensive care. So the New York Health Act includes primary care, preventative care, dental care, because dental care is healthcare, vision, because vision is healthcare as well, and mental health, because mental health is healthcare as well. And the latest version of the bill includes long-term care as well. The third principle that we organize around is equity. So the system that we create needs to be funded fairly, and quality care needs to be guaranteed for everybody. The fourth principle is transparency and accountability. So the system needs to be accountable to us, the people, and the decisions about our care need to be made by us, not the for-profit insurance industry who's out there to like make a profit on our backs. And then the fifth principle is participation. So everybody that is a part of the health system has to have a meaningful voice in those decisions, because those decisions are impacting us and our health. So kind of on that note, so the New York Health Act is a bill that has existed for a long time. So the idea of taking radical action to make healthcare more accessible isn't new. This work has been in progress for a very, very long time. So back, I think it's been like 27 or 28 years now. Dick Godfrey, who was an assembly member in New York State, introduced the New York Health Act, and it's been kind of moving around since the early 90s. Between 2015 and 2018, so 4 years straight, the New York State Assembly actually passed this bill every single year with larger and larger majorities every year. This past year, it didn't actually come up to a vote in the Assembly because of political pressures from having a now fully Democratic, or well, I wouldn't say Democratic, but like a Democrats holding the Assembly and the Senate. Due to political pressures, it didn't come up for an Assembly vote, but it did pass 4 years in a row. Currently, we have, in terms of the legislative landscape around this bill, in the Assembly, 83 out of the 150 Assembly members are co-sponsors of this bill. There's a very pro New York Health Act block that is going to be heading to Albany this year. A lot of them are coming from New York City. And we have a very strong majority in the Assembly. In terms of the Senate, we have 31 out of 63 state senators. So we're only one vote short of getting this bill to pass the state Senate as well. And to push for that, we want to push for that majority or supermajority in this upcoming election. So in terms of the Rochester specific landscape around that bill, so our Rochester state senators have historically been not just, I guess, anti-healthcare, but anti-housing. Thankfully, all three Rochester state senators are not running for re-election this year, so there's a very good chance that we can elect folks to the state Senate from Rochester who are supporters of the New York Health Act. I think to make that happen, though, we need to make sure that we aren't just voting for people that say that they're going to do these things for us, but once they get to office, continuing to keep the pressure on them, because I think historically what we've seen is that a lot of times we get people into office because they say that they support a bill, but when the time comes to take that next step and actually that bill, it can be like kind of easy for people higher up in that legislative body to put pressure on them and keep them from voting. And so we don't want that to happen this year. And, building support in upstate New York for something like this is really, really crucial. A lot of the support does come from downstate in the New York State legislature. And I think that our opponents often frame this as kind of an upstate downstate issue when that's really not the case. People in upstate New York want healthcare just as much as people in downstate New York. And we need to show them that that you know, up here in Rochester and up here in upstate New York, we care about passing this too. So in terms of, so that's like kind of the legislative picture around this bill. In terms of like how movement building goes, I think for our campaign, it's definitely like a people powered movement. Right now, we've been focusing a little bit in the past couple of months on universal healthcare in the context of a pandemic. And we've been focusing on storytelling trainings and having people tell their stories about healthcare or losing healthcare or not having access to healthcare in the context of a pandemic. And we have resources for that. And we are trying to kind of develop more leaders who are able to tell really powerful stories, because we think that storytelling is kind of one of the most powerful ways to build a movement. And then like, in addition to that, so, you know, our movement has to include everyone if we're going to win this. And traditionally, I think that we have been kind of missing in our movement a lot of the folks that are uninsured or underinsured, and folks that are on Medicaid, I think as well, because for a large part, I mean, for folks on Medicaid, they already have insurance. So a lot of times it's hard to get them engaged in the movement to create a new bill. But really, if we're going to win this, we need folks that are underinsured or uninsured to win. Exactly. So we need to change the narrative here. And our goal is to amplify the voices of like the folks that are directly impacted by lack of healthcare or inadequate access to healthcare. So in terms of upcoming events, I think it was already mentioned before. So we have an event coming up this Saturday. We're going to try to do it in person, socially distanced at Genesee Valley Park. It's Saturday at the 10th at 2 p.m. And we'll be talking about the intersections of health justice and racial justice, and why we need to be funding healthcare. The event is called Fund Healthcare, Not Cops. We have a wonderful panel of speakers that are going to be speaking. A lot of them have very powerful stories to share. And I think moving throughout the fall, we want to build more partnerships with you know, organizations that are doing work that intersects with health justice, because health doesn't exist in like a vacuum. It's like very much intertwined with like a lot of the other movements we see in the city. So those are all the things that I have to say.
Thank you so much, Mahima. That was really informative, and I think the New York Health bill is really powerful. And so I think it's so important to have those two things happening at the same time, because once you get people in housing, you know, you need to do healthcare and housing at the same time, because they're so interconnected, and that profit system is coming from the same thing. And so I think it's so crucial to have a space to talk about those things together and to show people in power that we understand how these things are connected. So again, I just want to do a huge thank you and round of applause on Zoom for all of our panelists tonight. I know Kristen had to hop off, but these were all incredibly powerful testimonies, and really encouraging to see the amazing organizing that's happening across Rochester. And so we have about 20 minutes left to open it up into a Q&A portion. So people can either kind of hop on and unmute themselves and ask a question, drop it in the chat bar. If you're live streaming on Facebook, you can put it in the comment section and I'll be sure to read it out loud. So give space now for that to happen.
Sabine,
Mm-hmm.
are you waiting for people to ask questions?
Yeah, I can, if anyone has a question, or I can start to pose
I have a
some
question.
for panels. Oh, perfect. Okay.
Barbara, do you know the property owner and the address of the the person you were talking about that's dealing with the insect infestation?
Yeah, the property manager is the SNS group. I think they're an LLC. So the landlord, he is 80 something years old. So he's looking to sell all of his properties and just kind of retire. So he's trying to sell the property to any LLC right now. But while he's doing that, he's also neglecting the tenants that are still occupying these properties. And this particular tenant, she's been on a rent strike, I think she said, for like 2 years. There's no C of O. And the landlord still refuses to do anything. And I asked if she's been in contact with code enforcement. She said that last year she was in contact with them, and he was supposed to get in contact back with her when he came back from vacation. And I guess that never happened. So the infestation has definitely gotten worse since then.
And Janina mentioned that DHS could potentially take children away. In the matter.
Yeah, like so CPS became involved. The children would be taken away from the household and she would be deemed unfit because of what the infestation is. Like that's not her fault, but DSS will definitely make it seem like it is her fault. And if CPS does show up, you know, when they see the conditions of the place, they're gonna blame her. They're not even gonna care to blame the landlord or code enforcement for not pushing the landlord to get these things fixed. And I think she said there's some violations there that's been sitting since for 2 years now. So code enforcement is like a big issue on this part because they're not pushing the landlord to make the repairs and to take care of the needs that need to be done in these apartments, you know.
So it's code enforcement that appears to be the, well, obviously
Right.
there's more than one culprit there. It's an
Right.
entire capitalist system, but anyway, that's a whole
Right. So if code enforcement
code
doesn't,
enforcement.
if they
not
don't cite the landlord or make them pay fines, these type of situations kind of like pile on and just keep going because there's no one holding them responsible for it.
Right. It's the only time I testified at City Hall, City Council was about an outrageous violation of code enforcement. And I got sent a letter and said, we're going to look into this, but who knows if that was ever done. And that was just before the COVID lockdown.
And that's the thing. So that's something else that I try to tell tenants too. Like, don't wait for code enforcement to do anything. Like, you be a pain in their butt. You call code enforcement 2 times a day, every single day if you need to make sure that the process is getting moved or that you have an inspector even coming to the unit, you know. So I always encourage tenants to like harass until you get some type of like positive movement in the apartment.
Exactly. I just wanted to just add something about United Health. I have insurance through them through Medicare. They made $6.6 billion, $6.6 billion in just one quarter since COVID hit, because lots of people are using insurance, and it's an outrage. That's a whole larger issue. I just wanted to throw that out there. I just heard that statistics. So they're making their profit. Anyway, thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you for the question and for bringing in that statistic. It's truly really horrifying when you actually look, you know, when you actually see the amount of profit that is made by these gigantic healthcare corporations. It's really very enlightening. Are there any other questions? I know we have a couple people on from People First Pennsylvania, and they are an incredible grassroots organizing around healthcare. So I don't know if anyone from there wants to hop on. and add anything about your experience with organizing in Pennsylvania.
It looked like Patrick had something to say. Did you, Patrick?
Oh, go ahead, Patrick. Looks like you're muted.
Pandemic, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Throughout the pandemic, we've been able to find hotel rooms to put our homeless in because of the capacity of the sheltering system, and we'd have to actually keep up with the CDC rules about distancing. Within that, I've found that they're actually paying from $1,600 to $1,700 on a monthly basis per resident throughout these hotel rooms. That's a ridiculous amount. That could have been housing. They should have found housing. My question is, I would like to know how will we go about attacking. We can actually act as a team with the Homeless Union has. I mean, we've been able to place through, luckily, I have an assisting facility called VOA that allows me to help place people in their facilities, but they're packed over capacity as well. And they're starting putting people in the hotels. And they're ejecting people out of hotels about, if you want to know the truth as well, during COVID. What do we do as a team of people, and how can we find a way to house these people? The landlords during COVID, they're very particular. We don't have really enactment affordable housing in the city of Rochester, but yet all these monies are being spent, and these hotel owners they're actually making a profit off COVID themselves. What do we do to attack that? Does anybody have any ideas?
Wow. So the hotels are getting paid way over market value for housing, temporary housing.
Yes.
Is that the situation?
Mm-hmm.
And who ends up paying that?
Supposedly the city is paying it for right now, but that allows us also as well to know that the city can provide housing or finance for our people in our city to be put in the homes if they can pay $1,600 a month to house a single resident at a hotel.
So it seems like the focus in that specific instance needs to be putting pressure on the city council and well, forget about the mayor. What mayor?
Gotcha.
Well, we've
Well,
been
wasn't
looking into it. Well, we've
Wasn't it-
actually been, can you hear me? We've been looking into it, and the council members, we have a couple contacts throughout. So, but everybody leads you to the next person. So I'm looking for a direct hit instead of just fishing. I'd like to, if anybody has that information, especially citywide tenant union, Barbara, if you have any ideas to relate to me in order so we can do something about this particular problem, I really would appreciate it.
Yeah, something that Citywide's been doing, we've been pushing for just Zoom meetings with them, just trying to talk to them. I mean, from our side, it was tough in the beginning to even get them to be on board for right to counsel. Like, that was a pain in the ass to even get through, because the mayor was just like, well, how are landlords supposed to evict tenants? And we're just like, that's what we're trying to prevent, is for landlords to evict tenants. Like, why is that always a question? Why is that always something on the top of their minds? Like, that sounds great, but what about the landlords? How can they evict tenants? And I'm like, I'm more than willing to like help you try to get meetings with them on Zoom. Like, I could support you and we can do it together. Because it was a problem for us. Hold on, baby. It was a problem for us to even get Zoom meetings, you know.
Okay.
Patrick and Sister Grace, Is it maybe time to call in Adam Bellow's promise that he and Corinda Crossdale would meet with the Rochester Homeless Union about
Well,
housing?
we've had 3 meetings with them, and we have a meeting scheduled, a phone conference scheduled for Friday with Adam Bello. Because
Okay,
we're very concerned about what's going to happen come the colder weather. And
Mm.
so we have had 3 meetings with him, with Bell, and he was very much interested. And Corinda was also, but we have to, their interest has to really convert into action now, because we're really reaching a deadline where something needs to be done soon. So we'll see how this goes on Friday. But we do need to get a lot of support, so that the homeless will be taken care of this winter. And it's rapidly approaching. And with the coronavirus and the social distancing, we're going to need more places, for our homeless, because we can't put them all here at the House of Mercy. I would fill it up regardless, and I would not put anybody out in the cold. But but with the coronavirus and the social distancing, we have to be sure our people are safe. So we need more shelter for our homeless. And this shouldn't be just our problem.
Mhm.
It should be the city and the county's problem and the state's problem. But it seems to fall on our shoulders, and they seem to be just going along as though it's business as usual. But it's not business as usual when you see the homeless who are hurting, who are suffering, and will be out in the cold. And we won't tolerate it here. We'll bring people in, but we'll also be criticized by the state and by the county for having too many people in our shelter. But again, we're concerned about the safety of our people, of our homeless.
Is it possible to bring up with him on Friday the possibility of having a Zoom meeting with a larger number of people? Because he and Corinda really responded to what was the last meeting I went to with you all and with Bello. They really responded to the number of voices and the questions that were put to him. And it seems like we need to revisit that. Do
Yes,
you think you would do it?
Yes. When you say other groups, who are you talking about?
Well, even some of the people here, like Barbara and
Yeah, well, we could bring it up. We'll bring it up Friday with them.
Mhm.
Yeah, then we'll let you know.
Okay, okay,
Definitely, because it's a very, as far as we're concerned, it's a very serious problem. It's, I mean, if we have homeless, we're going to put them in apartments, and there are not good enough apartments for them, or there are not apartments available to them, or there's sky high rents. The problem is just exacerbated, so.
Yeah, perhaps we could approach it from not just the point is what could he do, but what can we do, and seek his professional and political advice.
Right.
Well, we did say to him, we'll work with you,
Mhm.
but we need you to help us and bring in other resources.
Great, yeah.
Yeah. Good to see you, Lorette.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah.
I know it looks like we had a couple comments and questions about kind of in-person organizing, and specifically looking at like takeovers of hotels or apartment or housing. Is that something with the homeless union, different level, like, is that something that seems like that is kind of the next step with legislative inaction in these next few months?
We're hoping that it actually doesn't come to that. We've been able to establish contacts such as Mr. Bellows and a couple of representatives out of Como's office. And but during COVID as well, it's kind of hard to reach out to them. It's a time-consuming thing that we just have to wait. Luckily, you got Mr. Bellows to come here this Friday. We're going to work with him as close as possible. He's been beginning to support the things that we're looking toward to have taken place here in the city of Rochester, here in Ms. Corinda. We just got to slowly move forward with these people, the contacts that we have, like the congressional leaders, that political people that we have on our side. And we're just taking it step by step. I have a problem with being impatient. I think when I want to get things done, I want them to get done immediately. But I'm learning that, and it's just not just me. Sister Grace is impatient as well, and the rest of the society is also impatient. We need to let them hear not only our voices from Rochester and House of Mercy, we need to also let them, as Lorette stated, hear from everybody that's on this panel. And we will do our best to figure out methods when we do have meetings with these political figures to also include everybody that we possibly can, so they can also hear your voice and see the things that you're doing in our society. Because that's what they're listening to. That's what they're looking to listen. They need to hear. They don't really know. It's a lot of things that we presented to them that they had no idea that was actually taking place. I mean, if you're not on there in the street or you're not in poverty, you don't know actually how much people are suffering. So we continue to let them, allow them to know. And they have, in a sense, begun to pick up the ball. We just want them to run a little faster with it. And if we got to throw it at somebody else so they can run out with it, that's what we're going to have to do.
I have one comment and then one question. Arsetti asked about the council, mayor, county, and state are using our money to subsidize the construction of luxury condos everywhere, but there's no money to house the homeless. We asked that of a number of people, and we were told that they come from a different budget, that the budget that could be used for actually housing people is not the same budget that is used to subsidize construction, because they have different goals. But I think we all should consider what Peter and Mary are suggesting, possibly asking a way for us to mount a media fight along with a street fight, but a media fight, start putting out social media video, maybe, and stories of people, like even some of the ones that Barbara was talking about and other people were talking about earlier. What do you guys think of that?
Actually, I can speak again. That's a need. We just got to come to the meetings of organizers. We got to be able to cause people to make awareness. We can all come together as a team and organize this so that it can happen. We got to take every tactic and every method that we can to make the change. That's what's going to have to happen, especially during COVID.
Well, these problems didn't just suddenly emerge. I mean, they've been in the planning process for years. I mean, it isn't accidental that we have the housing problem and the homeless problem and the health problems that we have now. It's been planned for years, and the leaders are getting away with it. So what it means is we really do need to speak out and get the leaders to be the leaders of our government to be responsible for what is happening. They're sitting back and making the money, but what are they doing to really, cure this problem, help out with this problem? As far as the leaders are concerned, they have to be called to task to do what needs to be done to change the systems that keep our people oppressed and down. They have to be called to task. And we can't just sit aside and, and say, this is happening, that's happening. So what are we going to do about it? The leaders, those that are running our government, must become involved, and we have to make them become involved.
And I think tying it back to the week of action with the Nonviolent Medicaid Army, I think using that really as a tool of how healthcare and housing really does affect every single person. There's not a living person on this earth that does not have a relationship with housing and healthcare to live and survive and have a dignified life. And so really looking at how to unify people across those lines with their experiences with housing and healthcare in Rochester to make the people in power, because they're not just going to suddenly wake up and now care when they've been, creating these issues and profiting from them. And so how can we really, really pressure them and make sure that they are actually carrying out what we're asking for and then taking that over for ourselves. So I know we have a couple minutes, and unfortunately the couple representatives that we had from the Nonviolent Medicaid Army had to hop off. But if anyone from the panelists or any participants wants to make a couple closing remarks, we have a couple minutes to do so.
Well, I think we have to have people realize that what's happening here in the city is not just a city problem.
Mhm.
And it's a universal problem. Uh, it's a county problem. It's a state problem. It's a federal problem. And all those areas need to be involved in curing the problem and curing the problem. I mean, it's the poor in the city that suffer. But who's causing the suffering? Who's causing the pain? Where is all this coming from? People making money off the poor. That's sinful. And it continues and continues and continues. And when are we going to stop this? When will this stop? I mean, it's really sad that so many people are living comfortably in the suburbs and people in the city are suffering without housing, without education, without the basics in life to keep them going. We have a serious problem and more voices need to be lifted, and those in the suburbs need to join the voices in the city. That the changes need to be made. The system must be changed.
Defund the Pentagon.
Let's go.
Defund the Pentagon. I'm serious about making that demand. I mean, we have a obscenely bloated war budget. I don't
Oh,
call
yeah.
it defense, it's war.
Yeah, bloated is an understatement. If
Yeah.
we look at what our military budget is compared with all other countries of substantial size, our budget is equal to all of those other countries. I agree with you, is what I'm saying.
Locally defund the police, move that over to housing, healthcare, human needs, and nationally defund the Pentagon, defund the military.
We're working on it. Police Accountability Board Alliance is going to be announcing some initiatives coming up, and I hope you all will participate and support those initiatives.
I had a quick question. If we can't appeal or they're not hearing the moral request to help fellow citizens, is there an argument or an analysis that's been looked at or forwarded to demonstrate the larger benefit to the community, maybe in financial terms, of supporting housing and healthcare for all? In other words, supporting the people who are suffering the most is going to raise the benefits for the whole community. I know that's not the moral argument that we should be taking care of our brothers and sisters regardless of town boundaries or city boundaries. But is there any kind of an analysis that has been presented that breaks down the dollars and cents of investing in housing is going to have people in more healthier, using less healthcare dollars, using purchasing power, whatever. I'm not saying that real clearly, but I think Mahima is talking about that the Housing First model does demonstrate that. Because if we can't appeal to their moral, higher moral values, appealing to their pocketbooks might make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to pursue. We should start doing some research on it to show people. I mean, that's it. If they're not going to listen to the reasons why it is morally important, we have to hit them with their language and their values. Is if we can show that housing the homeless will save X amount of dollars in healthcare, that's a substantial thing. Does anybody know about research that's out there? I mean, we can start digging, but if anybody has read anything like
As a
I
matter of
actually have the Housing First model pulled up right now. So I agree that sometimes people will often listen to like their wallets more than they will to like the moral reasons, but I'm not sure that like I personally don't know like how I feel about framing things this way, but the Housing First model, like some of the studies have shown that like housing one homeless person can save to the, like, will offset 29, it's like, I'm like, what I'm reading right now is like $29,000 per person per year in housing costs.
You
Offset.
put a link in the chat.
Yeah, I
At
can,
least a good beginning point.
yeah, I can like link what I'm reading in the chat, but yeah, there's like, there are a lot of studies that show that like housing really does offset healthcare costs in like very, very real ways. The like long-term like benefits of like framing our arguments that way, like I can't speak to.
Well, I can. It really helped start changing some of the ways that juveniles were incarcerated when we showed how much that it costs per year to incarcerate one child under the age of 16 compared with alternative care. And we can also point out the morality as well. We don't have to just speak to their pocketbook, but talk about the practicality of it.
Well, I think it raises the question of where are the churches in all of this?
That's a good point.
You don't hear their voices. Where are they? And they're supposed to be speaking to the spirituality, to justice, to morality, to all of this. And they're very silent.
I think that's something that the Poor People's Campaign has been trying to address. The Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris have been trying to reach out to pastors and churches to look at the moral issues that we face. Joe, perhaps you can speak to that. I don't know what's going on locally.
I don't know if I can speak to it locally, but one of the things I'm aware of is that there are a fair amount of silent supporters. And I think we have to look at our strategies across the board as what we do with silent supporters to move them more into the direction of supporting a movement. I tend to shy away from hostile active opponents, and I try to center my work around neighbors, community members, organizations that are quietly supporting us, but not really made that public. So I think there's a lot of faith communities that would, take the biblical or the Talmudic teachings and say this is where they need to be, but may not have the authority or the wherewithal to speak out. And I think some of the Greater Rochester Interfaith Networks, I think it's UCLM, some of those organizations are struggling with that very issue. Even people like, I think in the Zen community, there's a place for sitting and witnessing, but there's also a place for action. And I think that's a struggle we take. And what we're talking about in the Poor People's Campaign is it's a relational struggle. Take that back to your own community, your own church, your own pastor, and have that dialogue. And I think, that's what the strength is. But one of the things that happened last week during the walks was that I think they had 100 pastors or 100 religious folks marching in Washington, past the Supreme Court and, past some of the other federal buildings, making that known. And I think it's a continuation of Moral Mondays. So yeah, that's all I can say about that. But thanks for that.
Joe, when you say that, all I can think of is, we have Pittsburgh, they probably has one of the best educational systems in the country. And they're only like a mile and a half away from the city, and the city has the worst. I mean, that's a terrible, terrible injustice. And who's doing anything about it?
Well, what you are seeing is there are some organizations like Erase in Irondequoit, and there is an organization in Fairport of active anti-racist groups that are starting to speak up and come together. And I think that's a start. I think we have to look at broader issues like, regionalization. One of the reasons the school districts are lousy in the city is because there's no tax base for them. And everything is relying on the state government to support them. So I think there's a long game we're also talking about, the long game of systematic change. I think that's probably a 20, 30-year plan. But in the meantime, we have people dying. In fact, before COVID, 700 people a day were dying because of lack of healthcare in this country. That was pre-COVID. So I think COVID, as you've all pointed out very nicely, has cracked open and shown us exactly what's wrong with this healthcare system. And I heard some people say in the call saying, this is a transformative moment, that we don't know what's coming next, but it is not going to go back to the way it was. And I think more people are seeing that now than ever before. So that's where I get my hope from.
We can hope and pray.
And by the way, hats off to the organizers of this meeting tonight.
Yeah.
I want to tell you how incredibly important this is, because this is a fusion movement, and we're bringing people together. And what we're doing in this moment is moving closer to the end game. We may not always feel that, but don't lose heart, because it really is making a difference. People around the state knew that this meeting was happening tonight, and they were cheering us on.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. I think that's a great kind of wrapping point, that this is just the beginning of these conversations, these partnerships, but then also shifting, keeping these conversations and these reflectives and these really incredible, vital, strategic points and thoughts, but then also how can we get together with the safety of COVID, but also keep applying that pressure. I think this beginning 6 months, especially the beginning 4 months of quarantine, I think shoved a lot of things down and got really quiet. And so while COVID may be a reality for the next couple of years, realistically, how can we not let that quiet happen again? And so in what different ways and spaces can we show up and keep having these conversations to move forward to get the current and long-term goals accomplished? So I just want to thank everyone for coming today. A huge thank you to our panelists and participants. A huge thank you to our interpreter. Thank you so much for coming, Wanya. Really, really appreciate having that. And I hope everyone has a beautiful and safe rest of their night. And please come on Saturday, October 10th, to Genesee Valley Park at 2 p.m. For an in-person event. And a lot of our representatives here will be at that event. So it'll be great for people to meet socially distanced in person.
And bring your mask.
Yeah, so
I say hi to, I didn't say hi to before. Barbara, all of you, hi.
So you can stay updated with the Rochester Homeless Union on our Facebook page. And all these organizations are also on social media with the National Union of the Homeless, New York State Poor People's Campaign, City Wide Tenant Union, and Rochester for New York Health. So keep following all the good work that we'll be doing and the future collaborations that we hope to have in these next coming months. So with that, thank you all for coming. And as the PPC family likes to say, one step forward.
Not one step back.
Not one step back.
Not one step back.
Not
All
one.
right.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thanks for
Good night,
coming.
everyone.
Night.
See you Saturday.
Yep, be there Saturday.
See you Saturday. Bring a mask. You gotta hide your face.
All right.
Joe.
See you Saturday.
Bring a mask and a friend.
Friend with a mask, right?
Friend with a mask.